All right, we should be live on all of our different social media streams. So Amber's going to check into that. And while we're coming up here, and double checking those things. So we'll get started here in like 1 minute for anyone that's tuning in.
I like the start. It was like Mario Kart with the...
Yeah, super cool. And the number of viewers is only coming through on Facebook and YouTube onto the screen. So I'm not sure that we can actually see the number of viewers on LinkedIn, which is unfortunate because that's the primary place that it's going to be.
This is recorded, right?
It is.
I'm so ridiculous. I don't even know how to find it on LinkedIn.
Oh, here we go. So we're up on LinkedIn with 26 viewers right now, which is great. So we'll go ahead and get started. And I see some people. Matt Riggs is tuning in. Thanks, Matt. Welcome. And we're going to get started. So welcome, everyone. This is our first LinkedIn Live. You might be watching this as a recording afterwards on YouTube or on Instagram. But welcome to the Military Veteran. Thank you for being here. I'm your host. I'm Brendan Aronson. Today, we're going to be joined by George Dutile. I'll let George introduce himself in a moment. Please go ahead and take a moment to drop into the chat where you're streaming in from, so your location, and then if you're a student, what schools are you attending and what degree are you earning right now? If you drop those in the chat, that'd be very helpful for the conversation today. We have some big announcements before we kick off. So this is the first time that we've actually announced who our VIP speakers are going to be for our conference in New York. So September 30th and October 1st, you should join us in New York City. If you like this kind of content, we're going to have fantastic speakers from every industry imaginable. Our VIP speakers are going to be General Petraeus and his daughter-in-law, Roxanne Petraeus. Roxanne just raised a $30 million Series B for her technology startup. We're really excited to welcome them onto the stage. We have one more VIP speaker as well on the 30th. This one was actually one that was requested by an attendee from our last event. Alex Gorski is going to be joining us. Alex was the CEO of Johnson & Johnson. For 10 years, he led them through the pandemic. He is on the board of J.P. Morgan Chase, IBM, and Apple. So he's a veteran. Sadly, he's a West Point graduate, but despite that, he's done incredible things in his career. So we're really looking forward to hosting him and to both of the General Petraeus and Roxanne Petraeus. So if you can join us September 30th, October 1st, I've been blasting it out on social media channels, so you should be able to find where to register. So those are some big announcements to start. You should sign up for our newsletter at themilvet.org. You should follow us on Instagram. It's at themilitaryvet. We're going to get that handle fixed as soon as we can evict the current person that's squatting on it. But more importantly, without further ado, I want to say thank you for people tuning in. I see we have people from all across the country joining us. It's really, really awesome. We've got people from Austin, Molly, thanks for joining. Matt Riggs from Minnesota, completing his MBA at Foster, Missoula, Montana, Raleigh, North Carolina, Ann Arbor, Michigan, Seattle, all across the country. Boston, William Barber, welcome, William. Chicago Booth, Pablo, I know you were at our last event, so you've actually met George in person, which is awesome. San Francisco, Orange County, Charlotte, North Carolina. There's like too many to list. So this is like just fantastic to see everybody tuning in. This is going to be a fantastic conversation. So what I'm going to do is give you guys my background real quick for those of you who have not had the chance to meet. And then I'm going to let George introduce himself and take the preponderance of the time because he's much more interesting. So I'm Brendan Aronson. I'm originally from Baltimore, went to the Naval Academy for undergrad, did 6 years as a Marine infantry officer, did deployments to Japan as well as to Iraq. Got out, did a brief stint in banking at Goldman Sachs in the healthcare group in New York. That's actually where I first met George. George helped me get that internship. Then he helped me get into Wharton for my MBA. So I declined a full-time offer to return to Goldman to work on a startup called Paint True, where we painted people's favorite memories. As part of that business, we were able to paint over 50 fallen service members and gift those paintings to the Gold Star families. And then I launched the Military Veteran earlier this year alongside Tim Shaw, my co-founder. So without further ado, George, do you mind just taking a moment and introducing yourself? You have the most incredible and interesting background. So
I don't know about that. No, I mean, thank you guys for having me on here. I mean, Tim and Brendan, you guys are awesome. I love what you're doing for the community. It's super needed, very helpful. So my background, the quick version, I spent about 16 and a half years in the special operations community. I did 8.5 years as a Marine. And then I'm originally from San Diego-ish, California, kind of moved all over the place. Transitioned out of the Marine Corps, bartended in Las Vegas for a couple of years, which is a standard Marine Corps transition. From there, decided it wasn't enough because I wasn't that smart. And so I went to the Navy. I went to Naval Special Warfare. And so there, I was the first Naval Special Warfare civilian operator at Naval Special Warfare Development Group, which is the longest mouthful ever. And so there, I served as an operator and did a total of 10 combat deployments, 2 to Iraq, 1 to the Horn of Africa, 7 to Afghanistan, and then 1 trip to Pakistan in 2011. And then did like 10 or 11 boutique deployments around the world. It was great, super fun. Had a great time. A lot of injuries later, and then married with 2 little kids. Got a little bit too hard, so decided to transition out. I transitioned out in 2015. So at that point, I went to Wharton full-time, intern at Goldman Sachs. I went full-time at Goldman Sachs afterwards, was there for just shy of 3 years. Then was recruited by J.P. Morgan to go over there. So went over to J.P. Morgan, the private bank. Was there again for just under 3 years. Fortunate to have a good relationship with the senior management there. And so kind of did a lot more than just a private bank and set up some pretty cool programs they were able to do. And then ultimately left there to start my own firm. And so myself, a guy that I went through the government's kind of worst training for your brain in Virginia. We went there in 2010, so we became really close friends. So he's spent 20 years in large cap private equity. And then a third partner, we started a private equity firm called the Briding Group. And so we launched that April. Our garden leave ended like the end of March. He was at Carlisle last. And so then we been doing that since, raising a $100 million fund, simultaneously recruiting our cohort of 5 to 7 entrepreneurs in residence in the search space, in the ETA space. So that's where I've been. I live in Greenwich, Connecticut. I'm still married, which is unique for the soft community. Same wife. Very happily married with 2 kids.
it's amazing background. I have to hear it again every time, and I'm always just really blown away by it. And I always feel awkward when people say thank you for your service, but I mean it very genuinely when I say it to other people. So thanks, George. And so let's just jump into it. So what year did you transition out of the military, or out of, I know you were like military adjacent for a while.
Yeah, so 2015. 2015 is when I left.
And what was the transition like for you? What were you thinking about career-wise at the time? How did you make a decision for what the next step would look like? Can you talk about that process a little bit?
So I think it's like a kind of a couple phased transition, right? I think when I transitioned out of the military going into Wharton, it was scary, but it was exciting. It was an opportunity. So when I was at the command, in the 8 years that I was on the team, I think the longest I was home in a row was 3 weeks. So I never saw my family for more than 3 weeks in a row in 8 years. And so for me, it was a chance to take a knee, introduce myself to my family, and then just really just become a human again. So loved that transition. And it was, had a phenomenal time in business school. My intent at the time was to go into private equity. And so again, Alex, who's now my co-founder, he's sort of been kind of my mentor throughout the process because he was in that space. And so, he's like, look, there's no shortcuts to private equity, which is, by the way, one of the best points to get out there, I think. And so it's like, you got to go to, business school, a quant school. And then from there, you go to a Goldman, you go to J.P. Morgan, and you have to get your chops, get your experience, and then you can go from there. And so when I went, there's a lot of people who in firms, like there's some great firms out there, very large, well-known private equity firms who like the team that I used to be on and would let people go straight in. And so I was initially looking to do that. And then during the recruitment cycle, he was supposed to come and visit me. And I was like, hey, so you gonna help me with my interviews? And he's like, I can't make it. I'm on a live deal. So I was like, okay, well, don't lie to me. When's the last time you were home? It's like 3 weeks ago. So I sleep under my desk and I take a shower, at the gym. And I was kind of thinking, I was like, look, I left the team so I can watch my kids grow up. And that's a little bit too much for me to swallow, frankly. And so decided to not go private equity. And so I would say the first transition, exciting, loved it. Loved the opportunity that I had in front of me for growth, reinventing myself. I loved that my kids were a little bit older. I was 35 when I went to business school. So if anyone's older, it's still a phenomenal experience. And my kids were, oh my gosh, they're 11 now, 12 and 9. So I don't even know how old they were back then, but maybe 5 and 3 or something. But it was really cool for them to see, like, if you go in the military and you get to sort of like a higher place in the military in your career, and then to quit that and reinvent yourself through hard work and education, it's like the example I wanted to set for my kids. So it was this wonderful time, I think, business school. And it kind of just gave me this excitement. It took away a lot of the fear I had of transitioning, because it was sort of, I level set with some of my peers. Like, yes, I was a little bit older, but the jobs available to me, the opportunities available to me were the same as everyone else. But then, oh, by the way, isn't it nice that I'm also a veteran, right? So it was kind of a nice to have, instead of just relying on I'm a veteran, let me cheat the system, which, look, you can do. So that was important to me. But then when I transitioned from there, it wasn't so great, and it absolutely sucked. And I had an extraordinarily hard time, like extremely hard time. I think that's when I actually had my transition, because school is just fun, right? It's a good time. You're playing around, but it was brutal, and I actually hit complete rock bottom. I would say probably 2 years into it. And so I had to just pick myself up and kind of reframe and regroup and reestablish who I am. And then I've really dissected it since then, trying to figure out why, right? And what is it? And I think I have some decent understanding of it. But so yeah, I guess that was a long answer, which I tend to do. So the initial transition, excited, was great. Loved business school. Was excited but scared to transition into a sort of a real job. You lose the job security, you lose the sort of health insurance and the stuff that you have in the military that you kind of cling on to, which are crutches, but they're important ones, especially when you have a family of 4. So I guess that's how I felt.
Yeah, I think that's right. We talked to a lot of transitioning veterans, obviously, and it seems to be, to me, the main points I've identified and why the transition is so tricky is like, 1, you're losing your tribe. 2, your sense of identity, purpose, and mission, which is very hard, right? Everything sort of flows out from that central identity of I am a Marine to, well, I want to be a successful business professional, but what does that mean, right? And then, you lose that financial stability, which is even more challenging with a family. So it's definitely a tricky time. I will say, I think I am in the same boat as you, where I felt like I landed in heaven at B school, because it was sort of like an opportunity to invest in yourself while feeling as though you're marching towards some sort of goals or moving forward in your career. And then when you graduate from B school, then your tribe is once more gone. So your classmates shoot to the wind. Mine was during COVID, which I think was particularly challenging. But I'm not the only person I speak to that feels this way. I think a lot of people right after B school are kind of like, well, what is next? What am I going to be doing? And I was so convinced at school that I would become successful after graduating. And now, what does that even mean? Can you talk a little bit about that transition, and what does it mean to become a successful business person, a successful civilian, human being, etc.? How do you define that?
Yeah, I think just one word, it's grit, right? And I think, when you first graduate business school and you get these sort of ideas, especially going somewhere like Wharton, where it's like, okay, everyone puts it on this pedestal, and you're offered these amazing jobs. Goldman was a great place, but they paid $125,000 a year. I had a family of 4 and living in New York. Like, it's literally not possible. And I had 2 kids that were school aged. And so, having to think through that. And I think it's intimidating, but it was exciting. Like, I want to start at the bottom again. I want to climb to the top. But I think what happens is there's so many external factors that you think don't matter that really aggressively matter really fast. And that's, again, ability to affect change as an individual, to do something to change the world, gone. And I used to be able to do that daily. And so I really minimized how much that was important to me, like how much purpose and passion was important to me. And then 2, if you just look at the triangle, right? Just food and shelter, I didn't have that. And my kids wanted to play sports and I couldn't afford it. And it breaks your heart as a dad to be like, you can't play sports. And then what do you tell them? Because they don't have any money, and it's like, we're living in this little 1-bedroom, we made it into a 2-bedroom. And it's kind of, we had this great life and we had all this stuff. And like bluntly, that's all things are, stuff, right? And that's fine. But when you have kids, it changes the game a little bit. Their standard of living, not just in terms of materialistic stuff, but again, playing sports or being relocated and then not being able to provide for your family. That was a big hit that I wasn't ready to take, and having to redo that sacrifice. And I think the way you succeed is fortunately be involved with things like the military veteran and getting an understanding, just unadulterated truth of, hey, here's the realities of what you're going to go through right after, when you're kind of chucked in the middle of the ocean of the civilian world, and here are the struggles and the pains, but that's okay, because the way you get through it is left foot, right foot, the same way you get through any selection, and that's just grit. And so the same thing, when you go through all these crazy selections, is you'll have to say, you take it in different chunks of time. And so one is, if I'm going to make it to the end of selection, but it's too hard and you can't think past that because you're in too much pain. Okay, well, I'm gonna make it to the end of this week, right? Or the end of the month. You just keep going all the way down until you get to the meals. And everyone's heard this. Okay, I just have to make it to breakfast. I have to make it to lunch, make it to dinner. Let me get to sleep. And then sometimes though, you're living, we used to have an expression like, I'm focused on breathing. And you can't even think past what's right in front of you. So as long as you just keep pushing your feet forward, left foot, right foot, and you're focused on breathing, you're breathing in and out, and you're alive, and you're not quitting. And so you get so bogged down in the things there. And you think in the civilian world, that's not going to happen. But to me, the only way I can equate it is that same feeling of, I can't do this, is impossible. Okay, well, just breathe. Just focus on breathing and push each foot forward. So I'm moving the ball forward. And then what you're doing though, in that process, because I think veterans have so much to offer because we have the ability to do that, is you are pushing the ball forward. You just can't see it. So it's extraordinarily helpful to get yourself a mentor, someone that's been through it, that's, had these experiences, to say, hey, it doesn't feel like that right now, but I'm telling you, you're doing the right thing and you're pushing forward, and just keep on doing it. And if you have to just focus on breathing, just focus on breathing, but just don't stop. And then you kind of get through, and you have to reinvent yourself. You have to go back to boot camp. You have to break it all the way down, because look, we all think we're super special, and we're great humans, but we're not, right? And just drink that in a little bit, right? Like, you're going into a world where your expertise and your experience are, yes, valued and appreciated, but they're not going to make you successful in your work day one, week one, right? It's going to get you a job. And then you have to go back to the selection process. You have to really build yourself back up. And so I think, what I learned is, I thought I wasn't going to make it. Just like a lot of times in my life when I was in the military, I thought I wasn't going to make it, but I just didn't quit. And so by not quitting, I was able to get through it. And I realized that was just me having to go through my selection to get past, kind of earn my spot into the corporate world, into more senior sort of positions. To start your own thing, or whatever your goals and wishes are. It doesn't have to be finance; it could be anything. But you have to put your dues in, and you have to just gut it out. And that's the advice I wish someone told me when I was transitioning. Because unfortunately, I had way too many suicides, and I think that's a big reason for it.
Yeah, that's pretty profound. I think a few things. Like, first, I think I underestimated just how challenging reinventing myself was going to be. And I think I overestimated my own capabilities right out of the gate, without recognizing that, like, why would I be good at a civilian career when I started? Like, why would I think that that's possible? I have this, specific domain expertise in this one particular field. That doesn't necessarily translate over directly into those civilian careers. Although I will say that aspects of it do. So it's like challenging to simultaneously understand that you bring a tremendous amount of value to any team that you join, by virtue of your military background, while staying as humble and hungry as humanly possible, and recognizing that you just have to be a little bit patient with yourself, because you're going to get better over time.
Yeah. Humility is massively important, right? Like, you eat a big piece of humble pie when you transition. So I was 37 years old when I graduated from business school. And I was working at Goldman as an associate. And I'm sitting here, and I went, I was on, one of the most premier teams in the military, and doing this crazy, the level of responsibility that I had. Like, I would sneak into a country by myself to do something, and the government's like, yeah, you're good, just figure it out. And I would just go do that, to the point of having like a 25-year-old tell me to punch holes faster. I'm not punching them fast enough. I'm like, I'm going to lose my mind, right? So like, I used to have all this leadership experience, and I used to tell myself, I don't want to be a leader. I don't want to do that. Like, I just want to, like, be selfish. I'm going to make money for my family. I'm going to go. And that's another thing that I thought I underestimated, how important that is for me. I love to mentor. I love to have, I love to lead. I love to have a team, and these are all things that I thought I didn't need. And I was dead wrong, just dead wrong.
That's like 100% accurate. I think that's part of the reason why my first startup, Paint True, we started painting fallen service members, and that ended up being the most meaningful part of that job, was like finding this sense of purpose and way to contribute. And obviously, that led very directly into this current gig where I get to talk to transitioning service members all day, every day, and provide them with mentorship, which I love.
Yeah.
So yeah, one other thing I want to double click on, but before we just jump to the search fund piece of the conversation is you talked about grit. I think this is like massively important. I had the same mindset when I transitioned that you did, which was like, it's time to make money for my family. And my father was not doing well financially at the time when I first transitioned. And so that was very much on my mind to be able to provide for him. And I was sort of had this mentality of like, I think I'm done with doing like very hard things, or like the cool part of my career is done. And
Exactly. Yeah.
that is like, I think, very wrong. Like, we still do a ton of very cool things now, and it's just that I've developed different hobbies and interests, I think. But part of being able to feel a sense of accomplishment is doing things that are very hard, and grit is critical. And I've been telling people recently that I've been running because of the fact that I hate it, and I think it builds mental toughness. Like, I hate it, so that's why I do it. People think I enjoy it. I don't like it at all.
Yeah.
But like, what are you? How do you build that grit as a civilian? Like, what are you doing for your own like mental health and for building grit?
Yeah. So look, I think, when I think about grit, I used to think, I have imposter syndrome my whole life. And I think it's a great thing though. And I think it drives you to be better. And I used to think I'm not surviving right? Like, yes, so I've been blown up a couple of times, I've been stabbed, and I'm like, okay, well, like, I could have actually done better, or I could have, like, this injury isn't as bad as someone else's, or it's always comparing yourself to someone else. And it's always like, I made it, but could I didn't do it the right way. I should have been cleaner. And then what I realized is there's no right way to survive. There's no one right way to survive. The only right way to survive is simply to survive, right? Like, as cheesy as it is, right? Your imperfections will make you perfect, and be strong, confident, and proud of the scars that you have, and bring it to bear in what you're doing. And don't think you did it wrong, because you did survive. And I think that was a big thing that took me a long time to sort of understand. And as a military person, to the mental health question, what we suck at, generally speaking, hopefully not anymore, is one, asking for help. And two, this is good. Again, I'll just be that guy. Self-love. No one thinks it's okay or wants to love themselves. And they think that it's like, even saying it out loud, people are like, oh my gosh, that's like, you're so blah, 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 insert expletive here or there. And it's a culture of just ignoring yourself and just saying like, I need to just go harder. I need to do more. But you have to take care of yourself. And when I was at the command, we had a psychologist. And so they made it mandatory after every deployment for us to see a psychologist. And so the way he expects is none of the guys wanted to go in there, right? And so when we went in there, they were like, he's like, hey guys, check it out. You guys aren't Toyota Camrys. You're not these wonderfully reliable things that can last forever. He's like, you guys are high performers. You're like Ferraris. Of course, he's playing to our ego. You guys are Ferraris, which is a high performance machine. But what do Ferraris need? A lot of tune-ups. He's like, so if you don't have a tune-up, you're dead in the water. And so kind of that got us all in there. We're like, yeah, we're Ferraris. We're going to go in there. But it was something that's important. And once we started having a conversation, it opened up the concept of what mental health is. And that was extraordinarily important. And I think when I hit rock bottom, it was something that, I ignored for too long. And I was like, okay, it's time to fix it. And so what I do now is, and I'll answer the civilian side of the grit. What I do now is transcendental meditation. I did that. I went through the training, goodness, maybe like 2018 or something like that. And I used to commute into the city on the train. And so I would do on the train ride in and on the train ride out. And that helps me a lot. And then it's honestly recognizing, when I need help, how I need help, and addressing it. And then I do stuff for myself, right? And so for you, if it's running, I like try to work out whenever I can, whether it's running or anything. Because like, one, I'm old and all my injuries are starting to kind of collapse on themselves. And if I don't, then they start hurting more. But I just feel better about myself. And Mary Ellen is actually the one that I think I've told you the story. I was walking around campus when I first started B school and I was getting skinny fat. And she's like, you look skinny fat. I'm like, you just told me how to speak to people. I don't think you're allowed to tell me that anymore. Like, joking around. She's like, well, I can tell you that. And her thing was, she's like, why aren't you working out? I was like, I can't, I don't have time. And this is, I think, one of the most important messages like I got from business school. I was like, look, I'm older. This is a really, really hard quant school. I took all the hard finance classes because I really wanted to get as much as I could out of it. I was like, I need to study. Like, every hour I need to study. And she was like, an hour spent in the gym is better than an hour spent studying, because your brain is not at its full function and its full power. And for your whole career, you were in shape. You were paid to be in shape, and that's your identity and who you were. So by not doing that, you're a lesser version of yourself. And it was impactful. And so she's like, next time I see you, you better not be skinny fat. And so look, fast forward 3, 4, 5 months later, she was like, all right, you're looking better. And once I got to Goldman, I started spiraling down again. She called me and she was like, are you skinny fat? I'm like, I am skinny fat. And she's like, go to the gym. I'm like, I can't. She's like, I'm not gonna give you the same speech. Go to the gym. And so I did, and I started working out, and I got a lot happier, and I got my confidence and my swagger. And you need that in the civilian world, because we go as veterans and we think we're the best, and we have all the swagger and confidence because we do really hard things and we do them well, and we were successful at that. And then you reinvent yourself and you start from scratch and you lose that self-confidence. But that's what makes us great. That's why our partners loved us. That's why our kids love us. That's why our friends love us, right? That's who we are. Don't shy from that. Just get it back. And the way I got it back was I started working out, and I was like, oh my gosh, like Coleman's gonna get mad at me because I'm gonna spend 45 minutes in the gym. And it was the opposite. I went down in the gym and they're like, hey, good for you. Oh, okay. But it gives you that swagger and that confidence, and you need that to make it through, right? And so how do you get grit in the civilian world? It's identifying your weaknesses and everything that's crushing your soul, and trying your best either to change it and realizing you can't do it immediately, because we're not in a position to just immediately make a change like maybe we used to be able to do. We're not pivoting quickly, right? In order to do a startup and just switch, that's not an overnight thing, right? If you want to go from Goldman to, if you want to go Goldman and J.P. Morgan, yes, that is an overnight thing, right? It's not a pivot. Leaving J.P. Morgan and going into start my own private equity firm, that's a big pivot. But you have to be okay with, this is why I'm struggling. These are the factors that are horrible. What can I do to affect change on myself, right? So anything you can do to affect before you hit the mission, before you hit target, before you hit the market, whatever you want to call it, you do everything you can in your power, right? So like, get dressed right for the interview. You do blah, 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 blah. You do everything you can. And then once you get to the moment, then it's muscle memory and you execute on what you know. And so I think it's about recognizing your weaknesses and flaws, recognizing what you need to change, asking for help, not being afraid to ask for help, doing what's going to make you stronger and more confident, and then having the patience to pivot and do everything methodically to get where you want to go. We're super impatient. We're older, generally speaking. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm going to do this private equity thing. Well, I have to do these 10 steps beforehand. And it killed me to not be able to just do it today, but you do. And that's how you get grit in the civilian world, is recognizing that you have to kind of go through the trenches and just be okay with it. And in that process, I think, is where you get the kind of commercial grit.
There are so many words of wisdom. It's like dense with wisdom. So we're going to take that piece and chop it up across and use it everywhere, because
I'll give you shorter answers.
There was just so much good advice in there. One, I'm a huge fan of meditation. I will not shut up about it. I think it's been very helpful to me personally. To talking about everything that you said about building grit, and then what really stuck out to me was talking about this feeling of being in a rush to become successful. Like there's these 10 steps in between where you are today and where you want to be. And I feel as though the people who are most successful are able to view things over a very long time horizon and work at something for a long time, which enables them to take advantage of that compounding interest that sort of builds up as they are continuing to work at something. And so, but that's an incredibly challenging thing that I think each of us deals with when we get out, because we just want to catch up to our peers and we feel like we're behind. And like you said, comparison is the thief of joy. So I think that was really
comparison is the thief of joy. I like that.
Thank you. I'd love to take credit for it, but that was actually Teddy Roosevelt. So
it's even better. To that point, when I got to J.P. Morgan, the head of New York was my age. She was actually, I think, a month younger than me. And it ate at me. And I'm like, look, you're my age and you run all of New York. And I'm sitting here like working 2 levels down from you. And it's like, how do you get over that? Right. And that's where you have to dig deep. And that's where you get the grit. Right. And look, this is the hardest thing. It's the easiest expression. Everyone says it and it used to drive me nuts. And now that I'm finally kind of cracking my own inner code, I understand how important it is when it's, life is about the journey, right? And appreciating and respecting each step of the journey. But how do you actually do that? And that's subjective. And there's a lot of ways. We can obviously have a whole forever conversation on that. But that is the game, right? Because I think for all high performers, you're never going to get to the finish line. Full stop. There's no such thing as a finish line for a high performer. All you do is I climb to the top of this ladder. It gives me access to the bottom of the next ladder. So I'm gonna climb that one. I get to the top of that one. It gives me access to the bottom of one I never saw before. The problem is you're never gonna stop. So you have to force it. My wife is amazing at this, and she did it when I graduated Wharton, and she did it when I left JP Morgan, and when I started my own thing. And she's like, look, you need to stop and appreciate everything you've accomplished to date. It's everything against my nature. I'm always like, yesterday's nothing. It's what's tomorrow is the most important thing. And yes, that's true. But if you don't stop and take a pause and appreciate everything you've accomplished to date and look around you and realize everything all your friends, all your family, all the joy that you had a big part in creating that and accepting that for a day, which again is one of the hardest things to do for a lot of people, you will burn out and break. And so it's really important to have those moments. Just stop and appreciate what you've accomplished, but it's hard.
It definitely is. I want to talk about how to buy a business and your current venture. If we can.
Yes, that's the way to buy a business, right?
There you go. Yeah.
Now you guys know it's the real background.
That's right. Yeah, we asked George ahead of time whether that was a green screen because it's like the coolest background in the world. But, it's either the best green screen on the planet or it's real. But George, talk about that transition. So you reinvent yourself to go work at Goldman and then J.P. doing private wealth. And then you leave J.P. to go start a private equity fund. Mm-hmm. How, why, where are you at now?
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
The why is, to everything we were just talking about. This is sort of the completion of all of that, right? It's, I lost my purpose. I lost my ability to affect change on an individual level. And I lost kind of a sense of pride and swagger. And this exactly solves for all of that. So Alex, who's one of my closest friends since 2010, like we'll start something together. We don't know what it is. I'm kind of building towards something. I wanted to be I wanted the ability to control my own destiny, to sort of, and it's not about not having a boss. I actually like having bosses because I usually do really well with bosses, and it's actually kind of fun getting promoted. You get this external validation constantly, because when you're your own boss, you don't get any external validation, right? It's like fail or don't fail. But I like the idea of never having a ceiling, never having a cap, be able to grow something to my own vision. And then also things that I saw that I didn't agree with that I could change. So our big thing is we do 30% of our fund goes to veterans and underrepresented minorities. Really good friend of mine is Justin Tuck, the football player. When the George Floyd murder happened, he's like, I was talking to him like, how do I affect change in this? Like, am I going to put something on Instagram because no one follows me and I never had a social media presence. I wasn't allowed to. And so I was like, and I'm not going to sprinkle $100 to a nonprofit that's not going to affect change. And so then he essentially was like, look, representation matters. You have, Black cops, Black neighborhoods, Hispanic cops, Hispanic neighborhoods, and so forth. So Alex and I stopped and we're like, well, why stop there? Like, we should be putting Black CEOs in Black neighborhoods, Hispanic CEOs in Hispanic neighborhoods. We should put women, veterans, LGBT community. Like, it should be small business ownership, and being a CEO should be representative of the communities and the small businesses. I really dislike politics on both sides, on all sides. I'm just not a fan at all. I was always the execution arm, but I don't like the fighting. And so how can we actually affect change? And to me, it's through small businesses. And again, by adding that representation for every kid, this is going to get cheesy, but for every kid to be able to look over and see someone that looks like them and acts like them, and it's from where they're from, hard work, education, I can own my own business. There's no limits then. That's the American dream. So, we have an opportunity, and it's not on a grand scale. It's going to be a smaller scale, but we have an opportunity as individuals to reinforce the American dream. That was really powerful for me. And that gives me the drive and the passion to work 18-hour days, which I've been doing for the last 3 months. And it's not work. It's been great. That's why we did it. The how was we started looking in the search space, which is the entrepreneurship through acquisition. They're both the same thing, about 3 to 4 years ago. And it started really where Alex and I, so coming from the team, there's very few guys from Damneck or our CAG sister team. They love it when we say sister team in North Carolina, for them to go out and be in finance. And so we just got a ton of calls constantly from individuals. And we're like, look, man, Blackwater is great. I'm not saying that they're a bad place, but they were just waving around $200,000 to a lot of these operators saying, come work for us. You're doing the same job. But there's no future in that. Well, that's mean for me to say. There's a different future in that. And so we're like, look, top business schools love this profile, right? Like, this is a great profile because you can be extraordinarily successful with the right education and the right experience. So we started getting men and women through it. And so started myself. And so now there's a ton of nonprofits, which you guys are a part of, which is fantastic, by the way. But since I'm old, there wasn't as many back there, really, if any, I don't think, that were doing that. And so we started helping these people. And then we started seeing, we got in the search space because some friends were in it, and we kind of started looking into it and like, wow, veterans would be really good at this. There's a lot of similarities. And so we started just helping people transition. And then we started doing a bunch of help talks, started a nonprofit called searchandacquire.org, which sort of brings the search space to the veteran community to give them an example of what it is, right? So we started doing all that. Because again, I'm gonna ramble too far, but that's why and the how, I guess. We started that way. And then as we were doing it and we were looking at the search space, the ETA, we started doing investments off personal balance sheet once we were a little bit more seasoned in our own commercial world. And so we backed about 70 searchers, minority stakes, and have closed about, I think, 43 transactions so far over the last 3 years. And then a consistent theme that we saw was a lot of frustration of having to reinvent the wheel. And so, okay, well, how do we fix that? So a lot of stress points. Raising the money is super stressful. Finding the business, super stressful. It takes about 2 years, on average, looking at 2,000 businesses to get that once. You're kissing a lot of frogs. The actual acquisition is extraordinarily hard, right? A lot of searchers are playing private equity for 3 months, and that's a big ask. And then the fourth, the last portion is the CEO, which, like, let's just be honest, most searchers are like, that part's easy. I'm designed to be a CEO. And little do they know that's going to be really hard, but that's okay. We'll get to that one when they get to that one, right? And so we started helping a lot. We started helping the modeling. Alex actually created a model for the search community and gave it for free. And we teach it at the top 10 business schools. And so that's when we started really getting into it. And then we're like, look, we have an opportunity, we think, to be a different player in this space by kind of partnering with it and creating a cohort of individuals to go through and to help with, so they don't have to worry about raising money. That part's solved because we have the money. And the second thing is the sourcing. So there's like 3 legs to the stool, right? There's sourcing, which is finding the business. There's acquiring the business, and there's the execution, right? So there's the operating of the business. So on the sourcing side, that's sort of my background in the private wealth space and private banking. But you know what? The only thing harder than calling a bunch of small business owners to get them to sell their business is to call a small business owner and tell them to give you all of their money, and so in all of their wealth. So it's a similar concept. And so I help a ton on the sourcing side. Alex, 20 years, large cap private equity, Carlyle and Bancap and Blackstone. So I mean, he's a freak when it comes to the deal judgment, the structuring, valuations. So he helps extensively in that portion. And then the third portion, Steve, our third partner, is a multi-time CEO he's built 3 companies in this space, and with access to 2 access to Vista and 1 to Motorola. So we're sort of like able to help. And so our whole motto is service through action. Like, we want skin in the fight. Again, I'm always action bent. Everyone sort of wants to help. They don't do anything about it. They talk about it. Like, no, we'll show you through action how we're going to actually do it. And so that's how we sort of like kind of started brainstorming and figuring it all out. And then it just started really coming together. And then we're like, okay, look, we'll do the majority stake in the investment. And then we also see the power coming from team cultures in the Marine Corps and NSW is teams are important, especially when things are hard. And so we have this cohort of 5 to 7, per year. We go to Puerto Rico for 10 days, and it's sort of like offsite, gets everyone out of their day-to-day lives. It's in a beautiful place because we don't need to torture ourselves anymore. And then we actually have their partners or plus ones come in the last 3 days to give a class on, hey, here's what your partner or plus one is going to be going through in the next couple of years, and here's the benefits of it, and here's how you can be supportive, and here's how we can be supportive to you as well. And by the way, you guys should also form a cohort so you have a tight-knit group. And so we're trying to solve all the pain points of search without giving the answers to the test, because you can't. You still have to do it. But we're trying to solve as many pain points as humanly possible. And so again, for us, it's like, look, I can help people, I can affect change. We can, kind of reignite the American dream, especially for all the veterans here. Mark Elliott from J.P. Morgan, the head of the Military Veteran Affairs, has such a great expression of the greatest generation and how many came through after World War II. And there's so many veterans who started small businesses. And he's like, let's not let the tide recede. The veterans are in high order right now, and people are very bullish on us. Let's make this a second greatest generation, and let's get a bunch of veterans to come in and be entrepreneurs, do ETA, and get into the civilian workforce. And that's across the spectrum. So that's whether it's nonprofits to prevent suicide, whether it's like vocational rehabilitation, whether it's trade schools, whether it's MBAs, whether it's buying a business, whether it's starting a business from scratch. Let's just make this group of veterans who are war-hardened veterans into the next greatest generation, right? So all of those things are just these big kind of chest puffing out, flag waving kind of things. But I realize that's important to me, and that's what I needed, and that's what gives me the drive and passion to kind of push through. So that's the, I guess, the why and the how, and then you have the raise the fun, which is the pain of the tushy. But you gotta do it.
I mean, it's like super inspiring stuff. I think when I was graduating from business school and raising capital for my first business, I thought about raising capital as like something that needs to be gutted out, and it's this miserable process. And once people write me a check, then I can start building. And I think I really undervalued how much my investors would bring to the table. And it took me a while to be able to like engage a group of mentors and advisors on a really, really regular basis. And I do it all the time now. George, you're one of them, obviously. Tim is one of them. I mean, there's a bunch of people from our community who are involved in the military veteran who spoke on stage at the conference who are in my personal tribe of mentors. And the thing that appeals to me so much about doing a funded search where you're raising money from investors is that you have that built-in alignment of people who want the best for you personally, but also for you financially, right? And for the business as a whole. It sounds like you guys are providing so much support to your searchers. Can you just talk about what that relationship is like between you and your searchers? What kind of, I mean, you've already kind of listed off some of the support that you're providing. Do you recommend people continue to build out their cap table and raise from other people?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So the way, it's kind of like a twofold, right? So like our advisors and mentors and investors, we approached it very deliberately, to your point. And I'm very fortunate to have a really close friend who's a very senior hedge fund guy who was like, look, you're going to raise the money. This plan is brilliant. You're good. Full stop. He's like, it's a matter of timing. And I know you're competitive and you're aggressive and I want to be the fastest and I want to be the first. And that's always how I am. He's like, I get that. I know that about you. Don't do it when you fundraise. He's like, look, you can get $100 million in a month. He's like, that's great. But what are you going to get? You're going to get a bunch of investors you don't want to deal with. It's going to be a pain in the ass and they're not value add. He's like, have patience, get the right investors that are value add. That's how you sort of like how it makes the most sense. And so we've really taken that to heart and we've really been hyper focused on that. And so what we did is we've gone out, we've said no to a lot of investors because they're just not a good fit. And so we want like-minded individuals that have things to offer our searchers. So one of the things we offer our searchers is our LP network. So our LP network, titans of industry CEOs, and ones that can be directly value add to a small business owner, whether it's putting them on their platform, which we have that in place, or whether that's them being on a board. So you can have someone that runs multi-billion-dollar companies that are like, I just miss it. I miss the fight. I miss the small business stuff. And so like, I would love to be on a board. I mean, so we can really nuke boards in that regard and support and help. And I think that's really important for us. On the senior advisor things, we considered risk. And so we have, and it's not official yet, so we'll be able to say it. It's going through the lawyers right now. But next week we should be able to announce it. But it's a very senior person who runs risk for a very large firm is going to run risk for us on our board. And General McChrystal just joined us as a senior advisor and investor recently, which is a huge win for us. In our opinion, our humble opinion, I think he's the greatest general of our generation. All due respect to all the others, but I'm a huge fan. And so he is getting involved in a very meaningful way. And we had this conversation with him, like, we don't want a name. I don't want a name on a website. Like, that's great and thank you, but we want someone that's meaningful involved. And so he is coming down to Puerto Rico to teach our cohort for a day on leadership, risk management. And then whenever we're back, he's going to bring the whole cohort into McChrystal Group headquarters and teach a full day to 2 full days of leadership, risk management, change of command, which is a big thing in search. You're essentially doing a change of command, right? You're replacing the founder or the old CEO and coming in yourself. And that's something that he's really good at. And so that level of support from someone that big is a good example of what we're trying to do with Bryden. So how we help searchers is our network is their network. And again, when I say our network, I'm not saying a name to put on a cereal box. I'm saying like the deep bench and their brain and their horsepower. So the person who ran like software for BankCap, he's one of the most successful tech investors like out there. He is an investor on our board as well. And he's like, I want to help. Like, I want to get in there and help these companies grow. So we have the network. So that's a big help. When it comes to the economics, so let's go to the 4 phases of it, raising the money. We do 90% of the equity of the search, as well as on the deal side. So mostly on the front end, we fund the search with 90%, and we have 10% open for the searchers to go out and find their own investors, whether it's river guides, mentors, friends and family. We found that most people want two things. One, people want to have someone from their network or someone that believes in them to be a part of it and have some skin in the fight and put in a little bit of money. And we're not talking a lot of money. It's 10% of a search vehicle. And then, so when the actual acquisition happens, they have the right to do it, of course, but if they can't, then we'll just fund the rest of the acquisition. We do think it's important to have that external sort of spot. That's the money side. What was the other question? So in terms of sourcing, we did the training. So once they're picked and selected, we chose our cohort intentionally. And we used best practices from the old team that I was on, as well as Baltimore Ravens. That individual that was there with both of them helped us create our selection process and screening process. And it's not just, these aren't negative selectors, right? So there's like behavioral and cognitive assessments. And it's not to say like, okay, like your personality doesn't make sense. No, that's not it at all. It's where are your weaknesses? And then we have an executive coach that we pair you with to help strengthen up those weaknesses. And then when we comprise the board, we make sure it's filled with your weaknesses, not your strengths. We don't want there to be an echo chamber. And so once they go through that process, the cohort was developed, no theses overlap, right? So what we look for are people who are about 2 to 7 years out of business school, have a little bit more seasoning, a little bit more experience, that have a thesis and a right to win. And what that means is, say someone was in, as an example, we have a Navy nuke, a SWO, who's one of our individuals. And so has a master's in nuclear engineering, and he worked in the nuclear services at a very high level for many years. And so for him, he has a thesis, he can go and find a business in the compliance and regulatory space of nuclear services. But he has the right to win because he knows what he's talking about. And that's a pretty big barrier to entry of understanding that problem set, but he has it, right? So that gives him a unique advantage. Another veteran is actually one of my old troop commanders and squadron commanders, who's an absolute legend in the community, went to GSV, and then he went then to a venture capital fund, was there for about 3-4 years, and was the CEO of a software company. And so he has all these ingredients, right? And so that's his right to win. But again, the cohort, they're all complementary to each other, right? So they can help each other. We go to Puerto Rico, we do the training, and it's everything. So we give them like, here's your kit, here's your CRM, here are all your databases, Zoom Info, Grata, SourceGrad, whatever. Here's everything that you need. Here's how here's classes on the tactical to the strategic. So tactically, here's your process of cold outreach, right? Here's your process of leveraging your warm network. Here's your process of leveraging intermediaries, and not just giving like a concept, but actually putting it in their CRM. Like, here is the sequence of when you send a cold call and then a cold email and how it all pans out. So we we give them all of that, as well as training on modeling and valuation and what's the right business and what business model you're looking for and how could you find them. And then so we help them with that. And then on the acquisition, and then during the sourcing side, we also are going out and also finding businesses for our searchers. And so we went down to Florida and found this amazing software company that we think would be a phenomenal acquisition. And so we kind of put it on the sort of back burner. And when we get the searcher that makes the most sense, we'll pair them up. And then that takes out the search process completely. In some lucky cases, right, that's going to take some time. But we have one that we're hoping to do that with in the next month. Again, really chop down that timeline. And then on the acquisition side, we will pretty much do it, not for, but with, right? We want everyone to help out, but Alex and I will get really knee deep in it, and do the modeling, do the evaluation, the structuring, and figure that process out. Because I think a lot of times in search, it takes about 2 years. It's exhausting, and you're looking through, and sometimes you're like, all right, here's a business, whatever, I'll make it good because I'm great. That's a challenging thing, because yes, sometimes you can do that. But wouldn't it be better if you find a great business that you can make even greater, right? And so we can help with the sort of like valuation and the way to look at these at the businesses. And then once they're in, then we help with the running of the business, and that's where Steve takes point. We help comprise the board. We have a playbook that we help you put in place to kind of grow out the business. It's again, really long answer, like I always do. There you go.
Makes you incredibly easy to interview. I appreciate it, actually. I see Pat Dossett left a comment saying, "Great work, fellas." Pat is an incredible mentor of mine, an incredible human being.
So Pat helped me get Wharton.
Yeah, it's this virtuous cycle, which is exactly the kind of process that we're trying to build at the military veteran to create that for future generations. So Pat, we'll get you on here as well. I would love to hear your perspective and share it with the entire community, because you've been a huge mentor and advocate of mine as well. So thank you, sir. We've got some questions from the audience, and I promised that I would get to them, and I'm going to go a little bit away from potentially some of the search stuff, but we will circle back to it. We had a question asked that was, I am currently active duty. Here's the question on the screen. Currently active duty, transitioning next year, and it's been a major stressor on my marriage being gone so much. What's the secret to a successful marriage? And I think this is so applicable on the other side as well. It doesn't go away, because you've worked at J.P. Morgan, you've worked at Goldman, you're working on your own hustle, which is very, very challenging and takes a lot of hours. How do you work through those relationship challenges?
It's a phenomenal question, and probably one of the most important questions. I'm extraordinarily fortunate to have a very strong and amazing marriage. And so look, you have to start there. You have to marry the right person. And I know that's a horrible thing to say, but it just is. And so I really lucked out, and I outkicked my coverage. So like, I'm constantly trying to earn it each day. So like when I was in the military, again, longest I was home was 3 weeks in a row. So never saw him. And then business school was an opportunity where I was able to take a knee and spend a lot of really quality time with them. And then Goldman, I was leaving at 5 a.m, getting home at 1 a.m. And so I missed out there. And so the answer is constant work and effort. Putting your family first sometimes means you don't get to see them, but let them know why you're doing it in a genuine way, not in an angry way, not in a look at me way, but sort of framing what it is. And that's one of the reasons why we have the partners come out and +1s in our training is, this is what you're going to have. So if you at least give the realistic expectations and envisionment, when you leave the military, it's not, okay, I'm no longer deploying, I'm always home. It's not. But you have to know your spouse and know the limitations and the accelerants to that individual. And so to me, there was like, you can kind of like really oversimplify it to like kind of two kinds of marriage, at least, in my old community, it was deployment marriages or home marriages, right? Meaning when you're deployed, your marriage is stronger. Or when you're home, your marriage is stronger. And so mine was the latter, in which when I was gone, it was miserable for my wife and I. But when I was home, it was great. And so for me, when I was looking at jobs coming out of business school, consulting wasn't even an option, because that's essentially being deployed again, right? You're gone, Monday through Friday, sometimes Sunday through Friday. And so that wasn't on the menu. And my wife was like, look, I don't care, where we live. So you have to like concessions as well, right? So I'm trying to like think of a concise way to say it. I'm not doing a good job of it. But her whole thing was, if you're within an hour, I don't care how long you work, because I just need the oh crap button. Something happens, you can get home. And so consultant, that was out, right? But some marriages are better the other way. And so just know what you are, be true to yourself, be true to your marriage. And as you approach decisions, it's a team, right? And it's you two versus the world, not me going to deploy to protect my family, me going to work to make money for my family. That's me and them. And that to me doesn't work out well. It's us versus the world. We are going to do this together. We are a partnership and a team. And each person plays their role and their part, and neither is more important than the other. And having that belief and that foundation. And now when I look at it, I'm like, this is my family and I are starting this business. Like, do we all work together? No, but we are doing that together, because they have to deal with me being gone. They have to deal with whatever. So look at it as a partnership, not as me versus them. And then I think a big thing is quality of time over quantity of time. And that's just a reality of life. So if you're not going to be home, I almost said it, I'm trying not to cuss. Don't be an a-hole when you're home. Don't take out your stress on your kids or your spouse, right? And I think that's so easy to do because you're exhausted. And so what I did is I would recharge my batteries on the train on the way home from the city. So I would literally listen to Nora Jones, and I would play like mindless games, like dots where you connect them or whatever on the train, and just let me data dump the day. I'm not a father, I'm not a husband, and I'm not an employee or an employer. I'm just me. I get my Zen back. I do my transcendental meditation. And so when I get home, I'm the most fresh I can be for my family, because think of it from their perspective. You're gone all day and they see you, they're so excited. They just want to give you attention and love. But when you're on the other end and you don't get your Zen before you get home, you're like, I just need to be left alone. That's how you're going to get a big divide. So quality of time. And look, one of the greatest things that our psychologist said, and I'm sure Pat probably remembers it, it's just fake it till you make it. If you don't feel love and you don't feel like you have the energy to like hug your kids or hug your spouse or your partner, and you don't have the energy to listen to their day and their struggles and how you can be helpful, shut up and do it anyway. Just like be quiet about it, take it and deal with it. And you'll find that when you do it, you'll actually start to get a closer bond. And then another great thing that the psychologist told me was, when's the last time you bought flowers for your wife for no reason? I was like, I don't know, never. He's like, on the way home, you're going to buy flowers. You're going to go there. She's going to ask you why. And you say, no reason. And if you don't feel like PTSD and all this emotional numbness, if you don't feel it, fake it till you make it. Because you'll see when you have human interaction between loved ones, it will spark what used to be there, what is there now, what can be there in the future. And it's extraordinarily powerful. So the simple answers are partnership, not individual effort, quality of time over quantity of time, and then flowers for no reason. And that could be, by the way, I would bring ice cream to my daughter for no reason. And I would get my son, like at the time, like a pack of Pokemon cards for no reason, right? And then you're talking about a $3 evolution here. And it changes the day and it changes their perception of you. And it makes it so they're like, okay, he's hustling, he's still thinking of me. She's still thinking of me, right? Like that's an important thing.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I want to take another question from the audience, which is to hear about your perspective on selecting individual roles, like individual contributor roles versus directly jumping to a management position. What's the benefits between thinking about those different types of roles, like post MBA or as you're approaching the civilian career?
That's a good question. I think there's merits to both, right? I think it's really important to be an individual contributor after transitioning, because you have to earn your stripes again. You don't have them. We have experience, and what we have experience in is management and leadership. And something specifically in finance is I think there's a lot of management. There are very few leaders, a lot of managers. So you have that as a strength. So when you're first going out, I personally like the option of doing individual contributor and try to really like cut your teeth and get a perspective, so that when you are in a leadership position, you're able to sort of like have a more empathetic view of those you're working with. However, it is our strong suit, generally speaking, right? And so going into a manager role can also kind of fill your joy tank at the same time. It's very subjective, and it's going to matter on what you want to get out of your life. And I always joke around when I speak with people that are transitioning. I'm like, knowing what you want to be when you grow up is hard, because we're older and maybe we already did what we wanted to be when we grew up. And now we're reinventing ourselves. To me, if you don't have a strong understanding of the space, I would go in as an individual contributor. If you do have a strong understanding or somewhere you're a little bit more comfortable, then yeah, you can take leadership. And also when you're an individual contributor, especially if you're post MBA, you're going to have, most likely, you're going to be a manager to some extent, but not all the time.
I'm going to jump in here and just say, I think a lot of military vets are actually really, and a lot of our society more generally is sort of focused on becoming a manager. When it's probably not exactly true. I think there's this field, the field of engineering has the most ability to do this, of being hey, I'm just a great engineer and I do not want to manage other people. And so I'm just going to be a perpetual, individual contributor. And at certain tech companies, you can rise really high through the ranks and just be that person is a fantastic engineer. Learning to manage is a totally separate skill set, and one that I think we have a very strong basis in, but it is very different in the civilian world. And just like every other skill set, there's just so much to learn that you could spend a lifetime studying it. So it is a really important question, I think, for people to consider as they're transitioning out, is what is an ideal role? But
yeah, okay.
I have one other question for you that I want to get to, and we've got just a couple minutes left. So this one's a really great question from Marco. As an entrepreneur, how will you measure success apart from revenue?
Oh man, that's a great one. Honestly, how much change I can affect. What I've learned is how many people I can help optimize and unlock levels they didn't think they could unlock or they weren't capable of. So getting an entrepreneur in residence, and they're like, all right, I can do X, and then helping them realize they can actually do 3X that, and achieving that optimization. And look, that's individual specific. That to me is success. And the second, and this is my massive passionate part, is I emphatically want to change the narrative from donating to investing in veterans. I say it all the time, but I want people to know and to see that we're not all homeless people underneath an overpass that needs a lot of charity. Yes, a lot of veterans need charity, and please don't stop it. But I also want people to know that we are also high performers. And I want the sort of society to see, all right, if they're really successful, we can maybe change our optic on what the capabilities are. So to me, it's unlocking potential for people is how I will judge success 100%. And then look, bluntly, outsized returns. It's not about the money. It's about being the best. And I don't like to lose at all. And I do have a lot of finance and quant. I mean, it is a Warden thing. And like, I like numbers and I like to beat people fairly. Again, soft elbows, but so to me, success is that. But honestly, genuinely, it's like the working with the EIRs and trying to make people's lives better. I know it sounds cliche, but it's extraordinarily important to me.
That's amazing. George, thank you so much for your time. Where can people find out more about what you're working on and follow along with your journey?
Yeah, so we have our website, which is brydon.com, brydon.com. I'm learning how to use LinkedIn. I'm like new to it. So you can make fun of me all you want. I encourage it. And yeah, like feel free to reach out. I'm a huge advocate for people finding their best selves. And like, look, sometimes that's not working with us. Sometimes that's not going into finance. Sometimes it's an individual contributor, but realizing, man, I thought I didn't want to be a manager. And I'm like, I do. And then be like, hey, make that change now shift, right? And I'm a huge fan of that, right? We all just need to help each other out because it's a scary time transitioning.
It's amazing. Thank you so much, George. I really appreciate it. And thanks everybody for tuning in. You can follow us on all of our different social media channels. I post about it relentlessly. So thanks so much for tuning in. We'll do another one of these next week with Nelson Collette, who is a private equity associate as well. He comes from a finance background, and he's going to be demystifying the process of recruiting into finance from undergrad for us. I know we have a lot of undergraduate vets, and we're looking to help them figure out what that recruiting process looks like. So thanks so much, everyone, and we'll catch you guys next week.